Millionaire secretly meets Mistress' pregnant wife, finds out, and kicks him out with nothing. They said Michael Redwood had it all: wealth, a sprawling estate, devoted employees, and a beautiful wife expecting his heir. But under the polished surface of charity dinners and high society galas lay secrets that threatened to topple his world. Rumors of an illicit affair with a mysterious woman began circulating in hushed whispers. As his pregnant wife, Elizabeth, felt his distance, she couldn't shake the feeling that her once loving husband was slipping away. When the truth finally exploded into the open, no fortune or social prestige could spare Michael from losing everything. This is the story of betrayal, heartbreak, and an unexpected fight for redemption. Michael Redwood was a name synonymous with success. He was in his mid-30s, tall, and carried himself with an air of quiet confidence. The Redwood family estate in Fairfield County, Connecticut, boasted a sweeping driveway lined with blooming white azaleas in the summer, leading to a stately brick mansion that once belonged to a Gilded Age railroad baron. Michael had taken the mansion into the modern era with top-tier renovations, marble floors, glass chandeliers, and cutting-edge technology in every room. On the surface, he was the enviable picture of a self-made millionaire. Over a decade prior, as a fresh-faced graduate from Columbia University, Michael had leveraged a small inheritance from his late father, Robert Redwood, into a lucrative real estate venture. From flipping houses in struggling neighborhoods to investing in commercial properties that turned eye-popping profits, his Midas touch became almost legendary in the world of property development. But beyond the press releases and philanthropic events was a man whose hunger for success often eclipsed his sense of responsibility. Michael believed in winning at all costs, in business and, unfortunately, sometimes in personal relationships as well. His wife, Elizabeth Redwood née Hastings, was an elegant presence. 5 years younger than Michael, she came from old money, but unlike many of her peers, she was philanthropic to her core. A dedicated volunteer in children's hospitals and community centers, Elizabeth spent her days working on the Redwood Foundation's various projects. Where Michael's eyes were always fixed on the next million-dollar deal, Elizabeth focused on where their fortunes could help others. Their marriage, from the outside, resembled a fairy tale. They hosted lavish dinner parties attended by politicians, socialites, and celebrities. Their photographs graced the Philanthropists of the Year section in national magazines. And now, after 5 years of marriage, Elizabeth was expecting their first child, a blessing that promised to strengthen their family legacy. One summer afternoon, Elizabeth, who was in her 5th month of pregnancy, decided it was time for the two of them to sit down and discuss some changes they needed to make around the house rooms to convert into a nursery, new schedules to accommodate a baby's needs, and the additional help they would require. She imagined Michael might be concerned about his increasingly busy travel schedule, but she had faith that he would adapt. After all, he had always doted on her, right from the moment they met at a charity ball in Manhattan years ago. Michael had been particularly elusive that week. Elizabeth chalked it up to a high-pressure real estate deal he'd been chasing in Boston. She was used to his intense focus whenever he was pursuing a big fish, as he called it. Still, she couldn't ignore a nagging sense of unease that had grown in her gut over the last few months. Little things, Michael's phone constantly buzzing, his abrupt departures for last-minute meetings, and unexplained credit card transactions in places she knew he didn't do business. But Elizabeth was determined to remain trusting. He was her husband, the father of her unborn child, a pillar of society who had proven himself reliable time and again. If there was a shadow looming over them, she wanted to believe it was just her own anxiety playing tricks on her. She breathed in the fragrant summer air, gazing at the subtle shimmer of the estate's backyard swimming pool. She felt a sense of calm and told herself that whatever was burdening Michael, they would face it together. If only she had known the secrets that would soon shatter their perfect world. One particular evening, after Elizabeth had drifted off to sleep, Michael found himself in his home office, lit only by a single lamp on the antique mahogany desk. His phone vibrated a text message from a name he had saved under MH, so Elizabeth wouldn't suspect. In truth, MH stood for Sienna Henderson. Sienna was unlike any woman Michael had encountered. He first met her at a luxury car expo in Manhattan 3 months earlier. She was standing beside a cherry-red Aston Martin, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, exuding confidence and intrigue in the way she carried herself. Michael had approached her, initially drawn by her beauty, but soon realized Sienna possessed a quick wit and an air of mystery that he found intoxicating. She didn't see him as just a wealthy man. She challenged him, teased him, and even dismissed him when she thought he was trying too hard to impress. He craved that excitement. For years, Michael had lived in a world where everyone either idolized or needed something from him. Here was a woman who treated him like a mere mortal, and it thrilled him in ways he couldn't explain. The line between a harmless flirtation and a dangerous affair blurred the night they shared a glass of champagne at her downtown loft. "Miss you," the text read. Michael typed back a brief reply, "Meet you tomorrow. Same place, 7 p.m. He put the phone down, guilt swirling in his chest. He knew Elizabeth was kind, trusting everything he once thought he wanted in a life partner. Yet he found himself seeking out Sienna's unpredictability. Why couldn't he have been satisfied with the stable life he had built? Meanwhile, rumors began trickling through the tight-knit circles of high society. A friend of Elizabeth's, Sarah Chamberlain, dropped by for afternoon tea and couldn't resist hinting at an unsettling piece of gossip she'd heard at a fundraiser. Some people claimed they saw Michael leaving a hotel bar with an attractive brunette. They left together, stepping into Michael's car. Elizabeth tried to brush off Sarah's insinuations, yet a seed of doubt was planted that day. She began noticing more and more suspicious patterns, late-night calls from unknown numbers, unexplained charges on their joint account in places she had never heard of, and the faint scent of an unfamiliar perfume on his jacket. Word also reached Michael's closest confidant, James Carter, who had gone to college with him. James had always been one to tell Michael the harsh truth, and he was worried. At a charity gala, he cornered Michael near the buffet table, out of earshot of others. "Look, I've heard things," James murmured, swirling a glass of scotch. "I'm not going to judge you, but you need to be careful. Elizabeth's pregnant. For God's sake, don't ruin a good thing." Michael averted his eyes, feigning nonchalance. "Thanks, James, but it's nothing. Don't believe the gossip columns." James placed a hand on Michael's shoulder, searching his eyes. "For the sake of your family, be certain of what you're doing." As Michael walked away, his heart pounded with conflicting emotions. On one hand, he was determined to keep his secret. On the other, a wave of shame threatened to crush him every time he glimpsed Elizabeth's growing belly. She radiated excitement and maternal warmth, carefully planning their baby's future from color schemes for the nursery to potential preschool options. Still, the pull towards Sienna was strong. She represented a life unburdened by responsibilities, a rush of adrenaline he felt he was missing in his day-to-day role as husband and father-to-be. He convinced himself he deserved these stolen moments, hadn't he worked tirelessly for years to reach his level of success. Outside, the summer air carried whispers of storms brewing on the horizon. Unbeknownst to Michael, forces were aligning that would soon dismantle the illusion of control he believed he held over his life. The next evening, Michael carefully chose his attire. He wanted to appear effortlessly handsome rather than obviously flashy. He selected a tailored navy blazer, charcoal trousers, and a crisp white shirt. No tie to keep it casual. He told Elizabeth he had a business dinner with potential investors in the city. As always, Elizabeth trusted him. She kissed him goodbye at the door, resting her head on his shoulder for a lingering moment before he stepped into his Mercedes. Michael ignored the pang in his chest. He drove to a discreet boutique hotel in the Upper East Side, the Talmadge, where Sienna had booked a suite. This hotel was known among certain circles for its absolute discretion. Sienna was waiting for him in the lobby, wearing a sleek black dress that accentuated her figure. Her eyes flickered with excitement when she saw him. In the privacy of the suite, the two shared a bottle of champagne. Sienna leaned against the window, looking out onto the city skyline. "I was worried you wouldn't come," she said, her voice low, almost vulnerable. It struck Michael that despite her bravado, she had grown attached to him. That realization gave him an odd sense of power. "Of course I came," he replied, placing the champagne flute on a side table. He approached her, gently lifting a strand of hair off her shoulder. "How could I stay away?" For a moment, guilt stabbed at him again. He thought of Elizabeth at home, probably sitting in the living room with a baby name book in her lap. Did she have dinner alone tonight? His heart twisted. He swallowed the discomfort, telling himself he'd deal with it later. Sienna poured them another round and softly traced her finger along Michael's lapel. "What will happen when the baby's born? Will you still be able to sneak away?" Her eyes were hungry for assurance. Michael hesitated before he responded. "I'll make time." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. Part of him wondered, was he lying to her, to himself, or both? Their conversation shifted to more mundane topics, art shows. Sienna wanted to attend. Business deals Michael was negotiating. But beneath the surface, an undeniable tension pulsed. They both knew this relationship was more than a casual fling, yet they also knew it was built on borrowed time. Meanwhile, back at the Redwood estate, Elizabeth tried to sleep. She tossed and turned, feeling an odd emptiness on Michael's side of the bed. She told herself it was just hormones, that expecting mothers often felt anxious. Still, she couldn't fully shake the memory of Sarah Chamberlain's insinuations. Around midnight, she padded to the kitchen in her silk robe to brew herbal tea. In the quiet expanse of the mansion, her mind wandered to lonely thoughts of betrayal. Early the next morning, Michael slipped back into the house, thinking Elizabeth would be asleep. He was startled to find her sitting at the kitchen table, sipping tea. Her eyes were bleary, her hair disheveled. She looked so young and fragile in that moment that he felt a surge of protectiveness. Elizabeth gave him a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Long night?" she asked softly. He nodded, not meeting her gaze. "Yes, sorry, it ran later than expected." Elizabeth said nothing else. She simply studied him for a few seconds, then stood up and walked over to the sink. Watching her, Michael was seized by a foreboding sense that the walls were slowly closing in. He forced a grin and made his way upstairs, determined to shake off the ominous feeling. Unbeknownst to him, Elizabeth had already begun her own quiet investigation. She couldn't allow herself to fully trust or to fully believe the rumors. She needed proof. And so, the first tiny crack in their marriage, once thought unbreakable, widened. Determined to protect her marriage and dispel any doubts, Elizabeth decided to take methodical steps. She began by examining the details of Michael's schedule. She'd known him for years, had been by his side as he built his empire, and was familiar with his legitimate business patterns. She felt she could distinguish normal real estate deals from a suspicious new pattern if one truly existed. Quietly, she started making notes. When Michael said he was meeting with Jonas and company, investors, she'd mark the time and place he claimed to be. She'd then compare that to the credit card statements, discovering whether the charges aligned with the hotel restaurant or if they were located elsewhere. It was painstaking work, but she did it with calm resolve. Simultaneously, Elizabeth confided in a close friend outside their usual social circle, Monica Reyes, an old college roommate who now worked in private investigations. Monica had always teased Elizabeth that she was wasting her keen observation skills on philanthropic committees. Now, Elizabeth hoped those skills could be put to better use. "I never wanted to believe I'd need something like this," Elizabeth confessed to Monica over the phone. "But I can't confront Michael without real evidence. He's so convincing that I might end up believing him if he denies it outright." Monica's voice was reassuring. "You're doing the right thing. Emotions are high, but it's important to stay grounded in facts before you act. I can help discreetly verify some of his movements if you'd like." Elizabeth hesitated, then agreed. Part of her felt guilty for spying on her husband, the man she'd pledged to love through thick and thin. Yet, the bigger part of her was outraged that he might be making a fool of her, especially when she was pregnant with his child. One evening, when Michael claimed he had to fly to Boston for a pivotal meeting, Elizabeth called Monica. "Follow him," she requested, a slight tremor in her voice. "See where he really goes." Michael left in the late afternoon, a garment bag slung over his shoulder, hugging Elizabeth lightly before heading out. Monica was already waiting in her car near the Redwood estate. She trailed Michael's Mercedes along the highway for almost an hour. Instead of heading to the airport, Michael veered off toward a smaller town. Monica watched as he pulled into a high-end resort nestled by a lake. He parked, and, moments later, a woman in a red coat slipped into his car. Monica snapped a few photos on her phone, capturing the unmistakable forms of Michael Redwood and Sienna Henderson locked in an embrace. Back at the Redwood mansion, Elizabeth was pacing her bedroom. She glanced at the crib that had just been delivered, still in its packaging, waiting to be assembled for their baby. Her stomach roiled with anticipation and dread. A short while later, her phone buzzed with a message from Monica. "I have proof. Call me." That night, Elizabeth cried herself to sleep for the first time since her mother's funeral. She kept hearing Michael's lies reverberate in her mind: work trips, investor dinners, urgent business calls. In that moment, all the illusions of her marriage began to fracture. Yet, she wasn't entirely ready to confront him. She knew a confrontation would unleash chaos, and she wanted to gather her strength and think of the baby. Her father had always taught her never to go to battle unprepared. So Elizabeth decided to wait, to plan her moment carefully, to protect her unborn child's future. She determined that she would not be the only one who lost out when the truth came to light. Michael's double life was becoming more complicated. His every waking moment felt like a juggling act. On one side, he had his wife, the woman carrying his child, his social equal at banquets, the benevolent face behind the Redwood Foundation. On the other, he had Sienna, a woman who ignited a passion in him he hadn't felt in years. He sensed time was running out, though he was too consumed by temptation to stop. Late one night, guilt overcame him. He was in bed, staring at the dark ceiling, listening to Elizabeth's soft breathing. The baby's due date was inching closer. Elizabeth's belly had grown more pronounced, and Michael often felt the baby kick against his palm when he remembered to ask about her day or rub her stomach. Each time he experienced that tiny flutter, an inexplicable fear and guilt surfaced. "What was he doing? Are you all right?" Elizabeth murmured, turning slightly. The moonlight highlighted the concern etched on her face. "Yeah," he whispered, forcing a gentle smile. "Just thinking about work." She nodded, half asleep, but leaned her head on his shoulder. Eventually, her breathing slowed again, and Michael was left alone with his thoughts. He told himself he had to end things with Sienna. He would do it tomorrow or maybe next week, but soon, very soon. At dawn, he woke early, deciding to clear his head with a run around the estate grounds. He jogged past the meticulously trimmed hedges and through the small orchard. The sky was a blend of pastel pinks and oranges. He recalled the early days of his marriage, when he and Elizabeth dreamed of raising a family on this very property. She had imagined setting up an outdoor children's playhouse under the shade of the big oak tree. That dream was closer than ever to coming true, but now it was tainted by his own betrayal. Michael slowed as he reached the orchard's edge, doubling over as if physically burdened by his secrets. For the first time, he felt real doubt. What if Elizabeth found out? Would she take him for everything he had? Would she be too devastated to keep living with him? Even if she stayed, would their marriage ever recover? The heartbreak in her eyes would be unbearable. Yet, the idea of cutting ties with Sienna also felt agonizing. She had become an escape, a different life, a rush he had grown addicted to. He had convinced himself that he was entitled to chase this thrill, having worked so hard for so long. Deep down, though, the rational side of him recognized that no justification could excuse the pain he was inflicting. Sighing heavily, he wiped the sweat from his brow and jogged back to the house. By the time he stepped into the foyer, he could smell coffee brewing. Elizabeth was in the kitchen, wearing a silky maternity robe and looking radiant. Her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail, and the gentle curve of her stomach was all too real. She handed him a cup of coffee with a small smile. "You look like you've been running for miles," she noted, her tone light, though her eyes held a distant sadness. "Just needed to clear my head," he muttered. She hesitated, as though wanting to say something else. Instead, she just nodded and busied herself with preparing toast. Michael watched her, conflicted, knowing that any day now the fragile facade he'd built could crumble. But he was too paralyzed to act, torn between the life he'd always known and the illicit excitement he couldn't let go of. As the weeks passed, Elizabeth gathered more evidence of Michael's indiscretions. Monica, her friend in private investigations, provided her with a detailed file, photos of Michael and Sienna, entering restaurants, hotels, even stepping onto a yacht Michael had rented under a shell company. The evidence was overwhelming. Elizabeth spent countless nights weeping quietly in the library, clutching the baby monitor that she used to listen to the baby's heartbeat. Every time she saw Michael's face, her anger mingled with a profound sadness. She recalled the vows they had exchanged on their wedding day, to be faithful, to support each other in sickness and in health. It seemed so distant now, as though it had happened to two other people. She wasn't sure what hurt more, his betrayal or the realization that she had never truly known the man she'd married. The Redwood estate felt strangely haunted. The staff sensed the shift in atmosphere. The head housekeeper, Marjorie Cummings, had served Elizabeth since she was a child and had come to live in the Redwood mansion after the wedding. Marjorie noticed Elizabeth's swollen eyes and her pensive silences. One day, in a moment of private concern, Marjorie approached her in the upstairs hallway. "My dear, you don't look well," Marjorie said softly. "If there's anything you need, please remember I'm here for you." Elizabeth nodded, her voice trembling with unspoken pain. "Thank you, Marjorie. I appreciate that more than you know." Marjorie gave her a warm, motherly pat on the arm. She had her suspicions about what might be causing Elizabeth's distress, but she knew better than to voice them. She was certain that her mistress would handle the situation with dignity. One of the more difficult tasks for Elizabeth was pretending everything was normal to the outside world. Invitations for baby showers arrived, and well-wishers dropped off gifts daily, from plush toys to designer baby clothes. Each time, Elizabeth forced a grateful smile, wondering how many of these guests had heard rumors of Michael's infidelity. The Redwood name was always a topic of high interest, especially among the upper crust. Determined not to appear weak or naive, Elizabeth quietly sought legal advice from a reputable family law attorney, Teresa Bloom. Teresa had a formidable reputation and was known for protecting her clients with relentless vigor. Teresa listened intently as Elizabeth hesitantly explained her predicament. "I still love him," Elizabeth confessed, "but I can't let him walk all over me, and I need to think about my child." Teresa sighed, leaning back in her leather chair. "Elizabeth, you have every right to protect yourself and your unborn baby. The law can be on your side if you plan carefully. If you decide to file for divorce or separate, we need to secure your financial stability. Prenups, property divisions, everything must be addressed with precision." Elizabeth clutched her handbag tighter, her eyes brimming. "I'm not sure I want a divorce yet, but I won't be a doormat either. Is there a way to ensure the baby and I are safe if things go badly?" Teresa nodded. "Absolutely. We can set up measures to freeze certain assets, or at least make sure you have control over enough funds and properties to support yourself. If you choose to separate, I'll make sure you have the upper hand." Though Elizabeth left the office with a heavy heart, she felt a spark of empowerment. The knowledge that she had options, that she wasn't merely a victim, gave her a renewed sense of purpose. She was preparing for a storm that felt inevitable, but she would do so on her terms. One thing was certain: if Michael truly was betraying her trust, she would not let him destroy their child's future or hers without a fight. While Elizabeth strategized her next move, Sienna was busy orchestrating hers. She had grown tired of being a clandestine fixture in Michael's life. As the months passed, she realized she wanted more than secret rendezvous and fleeting glimpses of a double life. She saw in Michael not just a wealthy man, but a potential future. Perhaps she believed that with enough pressure he would leave his wife and start anew with her. Or perhaps she simply refused to stay in the shadows forever. One afternoon, Sienna invited Michael to her loft. It was a converted industrial space in a trendy part of Manhattan. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, revealing her collection of abstract paintings and minimalist furniture. Usually Michael would arrive with a playful grin, eager for their trysts. This time, tension lined his features. He suspected Sienna's restlessness. He sensed a confrontation brewing. As soon as he stepped in, Sienna locked the door behind him. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steely. Michael set down his briefcase, exhaling. "All right, I'm listening." She crossed her arms, staring him down. "I'm done with this half-life. I see you once or twice a week if I'm lucky. I can't even call you whenever I want, can't show up at your place. I want more than that." He raked a hand through his hair, throat tight. "Sienna, you know how complicated this is. Elizabeth's pregnant. I can't just—" She cut him off, her anger flaring. "Don't say you can't just leave her. You can do whatever you want, Michael. You're choosing to keep me a secret because you're scared of the fallout. So let me give you a reason to be scared." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with resolve. "You walk away from me, and I'll make sure everyone knows about us. I'll go to the press if I have to." Imagine the headlines. "Michael Redwood's Mistress spills all." Michael felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. The potential damage to his reputation, to his carefully curated image, was staggering. His pulse thundered in his ears. "Sienna, I don't respond well to threats." She didn't blink. "It's not a threat. It's a fact. If you want me to stay quiet, then prove you want me in your life fully." She paused, her expression unreadable. "Leave her and be with me." He forced himself to keep his voice calm, though panic roiled within him. "You're asking me to walk away from my marriage while Elizabeth is carrying my child. That's cruel, unthinkable." Sienna's lips quivered in a moment of vulnerability. "What about me, Michael? Am I just a fling you'll toss aside once the baby is born? I have feelings too." A complex swirl of emotions warred inside him: remorse, anger, lust, fear. He swallowed hard. "I need time to think. I can't make this decision overnight." Sienna's posture remained defiant, but her eyes flickered with a hint of desperation. "Fine, but don't think time will make me forget what I want. If you won't choose, I'll force your hand." Michael left the loft feeling the walls of his life closing in from all sides. His affair, once thrilling, had become a noose tightening around his neck. Neither Elizabeth nor Sienna seemed likely to sit idly by anymore. He was barreling toward a reckoning, and deep down, he knew it was the result of his own reckless choices. A few days later, Elizabeth decided the moment for confrontation had arrived. She'd spent countless hours crying, raging, and plotting. She was done waiting for Michael to come clean on his own. With the overwhelming evidence Monica had gathered, Elizabeth felt the weight of heartbreak, but she also felt ready to reclaim her dignity. That evening, after dinner, she asked Michael to join her in the living room. She deliberately chose this room because of its large windows overlooking the estate's manicured lawns, a testament to their shared life together, which was now on the brink of collapse. She perched on the edge of a chaise longue, her spine stiff with determination. Michael could sense her unease. He set aside his phone, feeling a pit form in his stomach. "What's on your mind?" he asked softly, attempting to sound casual. Elizabeth inhaled deeply. "I need you to be honest with me." "Are you involved with another woman?" He stiffened. Several seconds ticked by in oppressive silence. Finally, he forced out a half-lie, hoping to salvage the situation. "I've had some meetings with new contacts." "Nothing personal," she cut him off, her voice trembling with controlled anger. "Don't lie to me, Michael. I have pictures, emails, our receipts. I know about Sienna." She pulled a folder from a nearby table and set it down between them. The gesture was almost ceremonial. Michael's eyes fell on the folder, and a wave of nausea swept over him. This was worse than he had imagined. Elizabeth wasn't just suspicious, she had proof. "Elizabeth the First," he began, his voice faltering. Her eyes glistened with tears, though her posture remained firm. "How long?" she demanded. He hesitated, swallowing hard. "A few months." The admission spilled into the room like poison. Elizabeth exhaled, as though releasing something toxic from her lungs. "While I've been carrying our child," she whispered, "you've been sneaking off to be with her." Michael rubbed his temples, the guilt now roaring through his bloodstream. "I'm sorry," he pleaded. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you do it?" Elizabeth's voice rose, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Was I not enough? Did our vows mean nothing?" He reached out, but she recoiled. "Elizabeth, you're more than enough. This was my failing. There's no excuse. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to stop." She let out a bitter laugh, wiping her tears angrily. "Didn't know how to stop? You're a grown man. You could have walked away from her at any time, but you chose not to." Michael closed his eyes, overwhelmed by shame. "I know. I was stupid, selfish. I can't lose you. I'll end it. I promise." His voice cracked with desperation. She shook her head, clenching her jaw to steady herself. "It's too late for promises. You broke us, Michael. My trust in you is gone." She paused, letting that settle. "I want you out." His eyes flew open, shock registering. "What?" "You heard me. Pack your things. Leave. This is my house too, in fact. Thanks to my father's inheritance, I'm the majority owner of this property. I don't want you under the same roof as me or our child." Fear ignited in his chest. "Elizabeth, please. Let's talk this through. I'll do whatever it takes, therapy, public apology, you name it." "I can't just leave." Her tears fell freely now, her voice ragged with heartbreak. "You already left me, Michael, months ago when you started this affair. I'm just making it official." She looked away, tears glistening on her lashes. "Don't make me call security." Defeated, he rose slowly, feeling as though the ground had been ripped from beneath his feet. He trudged upstairs, numb. Within the hour, he walked out the front door with a suitcase in hand. The grandeur of the estate that once symbolized success and power now felt like a mocking testament to everything he had lost. He glanced back at the silhouette of his pregnant wife in the living room window, but she did not move to stop him. Michael checked into a modest hotel across town, far from the opulent comforts he was used to. Even the basic room with its beige walls and bland paintings felt foreign, a stark reminder of how quickly his fortunes had changed. He spent his first night there staring at the ceiling, tormented by images of Elizabeth's tear-streaked face. In the morning, he awoke to dozens of missed calls and messages. Several were from Sienna, but most were from business associates and tabloids. The news of the Redwood marriage crisis had already leaked, likely spread by staff or so-called friends who thrived on gossip. Michael scanned the sensational headlines. Fairfield County's power couple splits amid cheating allegations, followed by worthless speculation from self-proclaimed insiders. He was furious and humiliated, but most of all, he was devastated for Elizabeth. She hadn't deserved this public spectacle. Text messages from mutual friends offered sympathy or demanded gossip. One from James Carter read, "What happened? Is it true? How can I help?" Michael dropped the phone with a heavy sigh, unsure if any form of help existed for a mess of his own making. Meanwhile, back at the Redwood estate, Elizabeth told the staff not to let Michael back inside. The pain of seeing him had become too great. She moved into a guest suite at the opposite end of the house. Sleeping in the master bedroom had become unbearable, filled with memories of happier times. She told herself she needed space, though her entire being yearned for a comfort she could no longer claim. Teresa Bloom, her attorney, arrived for a private meeting. Over steaming cups of chamomile tea, they discussed legal options. Elizabeth confessed she wasn't entirely sure she wanted a divorce, but she needed to protect herself and the baby. Teresa laid out possible scenarios: a legal separation with a formal arrangement for child support, asset division if she proceeded with divorce, or even the possibility of therapy and reconciliation if Michael showed genuine remorse. "I don't know if I can ever trust him again," Elizabeth whispered, her voice fragile. "But he's the father of my child. I can't just cut him out of our lives entirely." Teresa reached out and squeezed Elizabeth's hand gently. "Trust your instincts. At least this way, you have a roadmap of how to proceed." Elsewhere, Sienna found herself on the outskirts of the fallout. She watched the story unfold in real time on social media and gossip columns. Her plan to force Michael's hand had partially worked. He had been kicked out by Elizabeth. But now, Sienna was unprepared for the public scrutiny and the harsh reality of Michael's downfall. Did she want a man who might lose everything, including his wealth and social standing? Had she overplayed her hand? She mulled over these thoughts in her loft, sipping wine late into the night. A part of her felt a pang of guilt for destroying Elizabeth's marriage, but she also believed Michael wouldn't have strayed if his marriage was perfect in the first place. Still, she hadn't expected such a vicious spiral of events. Michael, in his cramped hotel room, found himself inundated by calls from reporters. His PR manager demanded a statement. He dialed James Carter in desperation. "I can't believe this is happening," Michael murmured over the phone. James sighed. "It's bad, Michael. Elizabeth's got public sympathy on her side. You need to handle this carefully. What do I do? You need to talk to Elizabeth, apologize, offer her everything she needs. Your best shot is at least being civil. If this goes to court, you could lose the estate, a sizable chunk of your businesses, and more importantly, your chance to be a proper father." Michael's chest tightened at the mention of fatherhood. He ended the call and stared at the wall. He realized, perhaps too late, that if he didn't act quickly, he might lose not just his home and reputation, but the unconditional love of his own child. Desperate for a chance to explain himself and hoping to salvage whatever was left, Michael reached out to Elizabeth. It took 3 attempts, but on a Thursday afternoon, she finally agreed to meet him at a small cafe in town. No paparazzi had tracked it yet. and she preferred to avoid further scandalous headlines. Elizabeth arrived first, accompanied by a subdued aura. She wore a simple maternity dress, her hair pulled back in a neat chignon. Michael approached the table, feeling a jolt of guilt upon seeing how much her pregnancy had advanced since their last intimate interaction. She was carrying his child, and yet he had forced her into a situation where she had to protect herself from him. She did not stand to greet him, but merely nodded for him to sit. Michael sank into the chair, trying to steady his nerves. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Elizabeth folded her hands over her belly, which Michael couldn't help but notice. "We need to talk about co-parenting arrangements," she said, her tone brisk, as if in a business meeting. A pang of sorrow twisted in Michael's stomach. She had once been so warm to him, now reduced to measured indifference. "I want to be part of our child's life," he said softly. "I'll do whatever it takes." She avoided his gaze, focusing on a point beyond his shoulder. "That's easy to say now. But the moment things get complicated, you run off, don't you?" He reached out a hand, but she pulled back. "Elizabeth, I know I've broken your trust. I can't justify my actions, but I can say I'm sorry. I am so, so sorry." She pursed her lips, a tear threatening to escape the corner of her eye. "Your apologies won't magically erase the pain you caused me. You cheated while I was pregnant. That's a betrayal I never imagined coming from you." Michael's voice trembled. "It was a horrible mistake. I was foolish, caught up in something I thought I wanted, but it never compared to what we have." She let out a derisive laugh. "What we had, you mean?" Silence settled between them, thick with regret. Eventually, Elizabeth took a shaky breath. "I've spoken with my lawyer. You're looking at a legal separation, possibly a divorce. I'm considering all options." He resisted the urge to beg or plead. Instead, he tried to remain calm. "Please give me a chance to prove I can change. Let me go to therapy, counseling, anything. I don't want to lose you or our baby." For the first time in the conversation, Elizabeth looked directly at him, tears swimming in her eyes. "I don't trust you, and I can't keep living in a state of anxiety, wondering where you are or what you're doing." He bent his head in shame. "I understand. You'll move your things out of the house." "I don't want you there," she continued, her voice steady. "I'll have Teresa draw up an agreement for financial support for me and the baby. You will keep away until the baby is born. After that, if you want visitation, we'll arrange it formally." Michael's throat constricted. He had envisioned fatherhood as a shared journey with Elizabeth, late-night feedings together, celebrating milestones. Now he might only see his child on scheduled visits. But he also knew he had no right to demand more. "I'll sign whatever I need to. I want you to know I'm here." Elizabeth's expression softened for a moment, but the hurt remained. She picked up her handbag and stood. "I'll be in touch." Watching her walk away felt like a knife twisting in Michael's heart. He sat there long after she left, staring at the untouched cup of coffee in front of him. His carefully crafted life had unraveled, and all he could do was watch the wreckage he had caused. After weeks of swirling rumors and half-truths, the media onslaught became relentless. Various tabloids printed stories of Michael's fall from grace. Anonymous sources provided juicy details, likely staff or acquaintances eager to sell information. Suddenly, potential investors reconsidered their partnerships with Redwood Properties. A scandal-ridden CEO was not the type of figure most wanted to be associated with. Michael's business meetings became excruciating. Clients would either awkwardly avoid the topic or openly question his leadership. He found himself fighting fires on multiple fronts, employees losing morale, banks reassessing credit lines, and vendors discussing alternate ties. Some of his long-time associates quietly distanced themselves, not wanting to be tarnished by the Redwood name as it took a public beating. Behind the scenes, Teresa Bloom systematically froze certain assets in Elizabeth's name. Fearing that Michael might liquidate properties or hide resources, she ensured that a portion of the Redwood estate and shares in Redwood properties were protected under Elizabeth's unborn child. It was a strategic move that effectively barred Michael from using those funds or properties as leverage. Meanwhile, Sienna realized that her affair with Michael had transformed into a liability rather than a golden ticket. She hadn't intended to trigger such widespread chaos. She had merely wanted more from Michael. Now that his empire was crumbling, she worried about her own future. While she had an upscale loft and some savings, she wasn't prepared for the negative press swirling around her name. Gossip columns labeled her a homewrecker, and hateful messages filled her social media accounts. In a last-ditch effort, Sienna tried to contact Michael, hoping they could salvage the relationship or at least support each other through the turmoil. But each time she called, her calls went unanswered. Texts remained unread. Michael was in no position to cling to her when he was fighting for the remnants of his marriage and his standing. Even James Carter, who had stood by Michael through thick and thin, warned him that Redwood Properties was on the verge of collapse if he didn't handle damage control effectively. "You need a public statement of accountability, Michael," James insisted during a late-night meeting in a half-empty bar. "Admit your mistakes. Show remorse. Do something to regain public trust." Michael took a large swig of whiskey, his eyes bloodshot. "I don't know where to begin. Everything's spiraling, and Elizabeth wants nothing to do with me," James sighed, leaning forward. "Then do it for your child. Show the world that you're taking responsibility. That might not fix your marriage, but it could restore some faith in your moral compass." The next morning, Redwood Properties' PR team released a carefully crafted statement where Michael confessed to personal failures, apologized to Elizabeth and the community, and pledged to focus on personal rehabilitation. It wasn't well received by everyone. Many dismissed it as a desperate attempt to save face. Still, a small segment of the public and some business partners acknowledged the effort. Elizabeth read the statement online, her heart twisting. It sounded polished, too neat. The Michael she had confronted weeks ago was raw and broken. This public apology felt more like a corporate press release than a sincere plea for forgiveness. Yet, she couldn't deny that at least it was a step in the right direction. She wondered if there might still be a chance for genuine remorse to shine through. The Redwood mansion stood eerily quiet without Michael's presence. Elizabeth spent her days meeting with lawyers, attending prenatal appointments, and ensuring she had everything set for the baby. At night, she would sometimes wander through the empty corridors, her thoughts drifting to past memories. The empire Michael had built once felt so secure, but now it lay in ruins, much like their marriage. A month later, Elizabeth's due date approached. She had largely shut Michael out, communicating only through lawyers regarding the baby's health and arrangements. Despite her anger and heartbreak, she couldn't bring herself to sever ties completely. She sent him periodic updates about the baby's growth, how she was measuring, what the doctor advised, and so on. Michael clung to these messages like a lifeline. During one of her final prenatal checkups, Elizabeth was surprised to find Michael in the waiting room. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, his suit slightly wrinkled. The clean-shaven, impeccably groomed man she once knew had been replaced by a fraught figure, weighed down by remorse and stress. "Hi," he said softly, standing when she entered. She clutched her handbag, startled to see him. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed. "I know our communication has been minimal, but I needed to see how you and the baby are doing. I asked your OB for the appointment schedule. I hope that's okay." She considered telling him to leave, but part of her couldn't. "Well, it's just a routine check. I'm fine." They sat in silence until the nurse called her name. Without a word, Elizabeth walked in, and Michael followed. The doctor, familiar with the Redwood couple, greeted them warmly but took note of the tension in the air. Elizabeth hopped onto the examination table and the ultrasound began. Within seconds, the rapid flicker of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. Michael held his breath, his eyes glued to the monitor, displaying the tiny form. He reached out instinctively, and for a moment Elizabeth let him rest his hand near hers. Tears glistened in Michael's eyes. It was the first time he'd seen an ultrasound in person since Elizabeth had discovered his betrayal. The reality of impending fatherhood hit him harder than ever. After the checkup, which showed the baby was healthy, Elizabeth gathered her things. She paused at the door, turning to Michael. "So, you've moved into a new apartment?" He nodded, attempting a smile. "Yeah, a small place downtown. The business is still shaky, but it's stable enough for now. I just wanted to make sure you're all right." She studied him, noticing the genuine concern etched in his features. It was the same earnest man she had once fallen in love with, but with a deep sorrow she'd never seen before. "I am. Thank you." Before they parted ways, Michael mustered the courage to ask, "Can we have dinner sometime? Just to talk." Elizabeth hesitated, memories of his betrayal still fresh, but also mindful of the fact that this man was the father of her child. "I'll think about it," she said, then slipped out the door. 2 nights later she found herself texting him, "Let's meet tomorrow, 7 p.m. at the bistro near my OB's office." When they sat down to dinner, it wasn't a romantic reunion. Rather, it was an attempt to find a middle ground. Michael was forthright about his failings, acknowledging that he had been selfish. He explained that he'd cut off all contact with Sienna. "It's over," he said, voice trembling. "I don't expect you to believe me right away, but it's true." Elizabeth listened, arms crossed protectively over her stomach. "I'm still hurt, angry, but I want our child to have 2 parents who, at the very least, can be civil. Maybe with time we can salvage some respect between us." He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "Thank you. That means everything to me." They agreed that Michael would be present for the birth, but on Elizabeth's terms. He offered to drive her to the hospital when the time came, but she wasn't ready for that level of closeness yet. Instead, she allowed him to be in the waiting room if he so wished. In the final weeks leading up to the birth, Michael tried to make amends in small ways. He sent groceries to the mansion, paid for additional housekeeping to lighten Elizabeth's load, and wrote her letters expressing remorse. She didn't respond to most of his gestures, but she didn't return them either. A fragile, cautious bridge was forming between them, built on the shared love for their unborn child. Whatever the future held, separation, reconciliation, or something in between, there was at least a glimmer of hope. Amid the wreckage of betrayal and heartbreak, the impending arrival of a baby sparked the faint possibility of healing. The Redwood story was far from over, and so ends the tumultuous tale of Michael Redwood and Elizabeth, a story of broken vows, betrayal, and the faintest glimmer of redemption. As their child's birth drew near, both faced life-altering decisions. Would they find a way to rebuild, or would they walk separate paths, forever changed by sorrow and regret? Only time would tell if Michael's remorse could mend the deep wounds he had inflicted, and whether Elizabeth's resolve would soften under the weight of her love for their child. If you've been captivated by this roller coaster of emotion, heartbreak, and the resilience of a mother's love, please show your support. Like this video, share it with friends who love real-life drama stories, and subscribe to our channel for more compelling tales. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you stories of passion, conflict, and the relentless power of the human spirit. Thank you for watching. Infertile millionaire took homeless twins to his ex-wife's wedding. Everyone was shocked by her reaction. When millionaire Richard Montgomery received a wedding invitation from the woman who once left him for being infertile, he planned to ignore it, but fate had other ideas. Days later, he encountered 2 homeless little girls shivering in the rain, and something about them broke through the silence in his heart. What started as a spontaneous act of kindness turned into a decision that stunned high society. Richard showed up at his ex's wedding, not with a glamorous date, but with the two mysterious girls who would change his life forever. What followed shocked everyone, especially the bride. Richard Montgomery stood frozen in his home office, the cream-colored envelope trembling slightly in his hand. The embossed golden letters caught the afternoon sunlight streaming through the window, almost mocking him with their elegance. Elizabeth Carter and William Harrington request the honor of your presence. Richard's jaw tightened as he read the invitation again. Elizabeth, the woman who had promised to spend her life with him, who had looked into his eyes and said, "Forever," only to walk away when forever didn't include children. "You can't give me what I want most in life," she had said that rainy night 2 years ago, twisting the engagement ring off her finger and placing it on his coffee table with a finality that still echoed in his nightmares. Now here she was inviting him to witness her marrying someone else, someone who could presumably give her the family she so desperately wanted. "I can't believe she had the audacity," Richard muttered, tossing the invitation onto his mahogany desk. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, the familiar ache of rejection blooming in his chest once more. His phone buzzed. It was Marcus, his business partner and oldest friend. "Did you get it?" Marcus asked without preamble. "The wedding invitation." "Yes," Richard replied, his voice deliberately steady. "Straight to the recycling bin where it belongs." "You should go," Marcus said, surprising him. Richard scoffed. "And why would I subject myself to that particular form of torture? To show her you've moved on? That her rejection didn't destroy you? But it did," Richard thought, though he'd never admit it aloud. Instead, he simply said, "I'm not interested in playing games, Marcus. It's not a game, Richard. It's closure." "Besides," Marcus continued, his voice taking on a lighter tone, "wouldn't it be satisfying to show up looking spectacular, successful, and completely over her?" After they hung up, Richard stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the Seattle skyline as the sun began to set. His reflection stared back at him. A successful man by every measurable standard. At 45, he had built Montgomery Innovations into one of the leading technology companies in the Pacific Northwest. He had wealth, influence, respect, and he was completely alone. The doctors had delivered the news when he was 30. A childhood illness had left him unable to father children. He'd made peace with it, or so he thought, until Elizabeth made it clear that his condition was a deal breaker. Richard picked up the invitation again, his mind wandering to the +1 option. If he did go, and that was still a big if, who would he bring? The thought of facing Elizabeth alone was unbearable, but the idea of bringing some random date felt equally pathetic. As he slipped the invitation into his desk drawer, a strange determination took hold of him. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe it was time to show Elizabeth that he had survived her rejection, that he had found happiness despite what she had taken from him. But how? The question lingered in his mind as he poured himself a glass of scotch and stepped out onto his penthouse terrace. The cool evening air brushed against his face as the city lights began to twinkle below. "I'm not going to let her win," he whispered to the night sky. Not this time. What Richard couldn't possibly know as he made that promise to himself was that fate was about to intervene in the most unexpected way, setting in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about family, love, and what it truly meant to belong. 2 days later, Richard was still wrestling with the wedding invitation dilemma as he left a late business dinner. Rain pelted the Seattle streets, and he hurried toward the parking garage, distracted by thoughts of Elizabeth. He almost missed them. 2 small figures huddled beneath a store awning across the street. Something made him pause and look closer. They were children, 2 girls, one perhaps 10, and the other no more than 6, pressed together under a tattered blanket. The older one had her arm protectively around the smaller child, whose head rested against her shoulder. Richard stood transfixed, rain soaking through his expensive coat. What were two young children doing alone on the streets at this hour? As if sensing his gaze, the older girl looked up. Even from a distance, her eyes reflected a fierce protectiveness that struck him to his core. Before he could think it through, Richard crossed the street. "Are you two okay?" he asked, stopping a respectful distance away. The older girl straightened, suspicion evident in her posture. "We're fine," she answered curtly, her voice steadier than expected. "You shouldn't be out here alone, it's late, and this rain is getting worse." Richard gestured to the restaurant behind him. "At least, let me buy you some dinner." "We don't need charity," the older girl replied, but the younger one peeked out from under the blanket, her eyes wide. "It's not charity," Richard said gently, "just one human helping another." The older girl seemed to consider this. "I'm Lily," she finally said. "This is my sister, Emma." Emma offered a tiny wave, revealing a worn teddy bear clutched in her other hand. "I'm Richard. There's a diner around the corner that makes great hot chocolate." 20 minutes later, Richard watched in silence as the girls devoured their food. Beneath the harsh diner lights, he could see them clearly for the first time. Their clothes were worn but clean, their faces smudged but not unhealthy. They ate with surprising manners, napkins on laps, quiet thank yous to the waitress. "Where are your parents?" Richard finally asked. Lily's eyes flashed with practiced caution. "They're gone." "Do you have somewhere to stay tonight?" A slight hesitation. "We manage." Richard nodded, not pushing further. Something about these girls tugged at him, their dignity amid hardship, their obvious bond. Then a wild thought struck him, so absurd he almost laughed aloud. Could he? No. It was insane. Yet, looking at these two abandoned children, he couldn't help but see a parallel to his own abandonment by Elizabeth. "I have a proposition," he heard himself saying. "I need to attend an important event this weekend. A wedding. I could use some company." Lily's eyes narrowed. "What kind of company?" "The respectable kind," Richard clarified quickly. "I just mean I have this big house. You both need a safe place. Maybe we could help each other." "For how long?" Lily asked, her protective instincts clearly on high alert. "Just the weekend," Richard said. "No strings attached. You can leave any time." Emma whispered something to her sister. Lily listened, then turned back to Richard. "We'll think about it." Richard wrote his phone number on a napkin. "Call this number if you decide yes, day or night." As he walked back to his car, Richard wondered what had possessed him. Taking two street children to Elizabeth's wedding, it was madness, yet somehow it felt right. Richard's doorbell rang at precisely 9:00 a.m. the following morning. He hadn't slept well, convinced the girls would never call, but at 7:30 his phone had lit up with a message from a payphone. "Will come. Address, please." He opened the door to find Lily and Emma standing rigidly on his doorstep, small backpacks clutched in their hands. They looked even smaller in the daylight, with Lily's resolute stance contrasting sharply with Emma's wide-eyed curiosity. "You came," Richard said, unable to hide his surprise. "We discussed it," Lily replied, her voice careful and measured. "Emma thinks we should trust you, for now." Richard stepped aside to let them enter. "Welcome to my home." The girls' eyes widened as they took in the spacious penthouse with its panoramic city views. Emma gasped softly, while Lily maintained her guarded expression, though Richard caught a flicker of something recognition perhaps in her eyes. "You live here alone?" Lily asked, scanning the pristine, minimalist space. "I do," Richard replied. "There's plenty of room. Let me show you where you'll stay." He led them down the hallway to a guest suite with 2 beds. Emma immediately bounced onto one, while Lily remained in the doorway assessing. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked bluntly. Richard considered his answer carefully. The truth? I received an invitation to my ex-fiancée's wedding. She left me because I can't have children. I thought. You thought parading 2 orphans around would make her jealous. Lily finished, her voice sharp. Richard flinched. Put that way. His plan sounded callous and manipulative. That was my initial thought, he admitted. But now that you're here, it seems wrong. Something in his honest admission seemed to soften Lily's guard slightly. We should get ready, she said. Emma needs a bath. 2 hours later, Richard arranged for a stylist to visit his penthouse. As the woman took measurements and showed fabric samples, he was struck by how naturally the girls participated. Emma giggled as the stylist measured her, while Lily discussed color preferences with unexpected sophistication. Navy blue would complement Emma's eyes, Lily suggested. And perhaps something in emerald for me. The stylist nodded approvingly. You have excellent taste, young lady. Richard watched this exchange with growing curiosity. These were not ordinary street children. Their manners, their speech patterns, the way they carried themselves, everything hinted at a background far removed from homelessness. Later, as they ate lunch, Richard gently probed, Lily, where did you learn about color coordination? A flash of alarm crossed her face before she composed herself. Books, she answered vaguely. The library lets anyone read for free. When the new clothes arrived that afternoon, the transformation was striking. Dressed in a simple but elegant emerald dress, Lily looked like any affluent child from Richard's social circle. Emma, in her navy blue dress with white trim, was absolutely adorable. You both look wonderful, Richard said, genuine warmth in his voice. Emma beamed, but Lily's response caught him off guard. We know how to play our parts, Mr. Montgomery, she said quietly. Just remember this is temporary. As Richard watched them examine their reflections in the hallway mirror, he wondered what secrets these mysterious girls were hiding and why, despite his better judgment, he felt increasingly protective of them both. The day of the wedding arrived with brilliant sunshine streaming through the penthouse windows. Richard adjusted his tie, checking his reflection one last time. The past 2 days with Lily and Emma had been surprisingly pleasant. Despite Lily's continued weariness, the girls had adapted to his home with remarkable ease. Mr. Montgomery? Emma's small voice called from the doorway. Are we leaving soon? Richard turned and felt his breath catch. Emma stood there in her navy dress, her hair arranged in perfect ringlets, adorned with a simple ribbon. She had a natural grace that defied her young age. You look beautiful, Emma, he said sincerely. She smiled, revealing a missing front tooth. Lily helped me. She's really good at hair things. As if on cue, Lily appeared behind her sister. The emerald dress complemented her auburn hair, which was swept into an elegant half-updo. She looked poised, collected, and far older than her years. We're ready, she stated simply, though Richard detected a slight nervousness in her voice. Remember our agreement, she added. We play our parts, attend this wedding, and then you help us with. I remember, Richard interrupted, aware of Emma listening intently. The sisters had finally revealed what they wanted in exchange, help finding a distant relative they claimed might take them in. And he kept his promises. The drive to the Harrington estate was quiet. Through the rearview mirror, Richard watched the girls taking in the manicured landscapes of Seattle's wealthiest district. Emma pointed excitedly at fountains and gardens, while Lily observed everything with calculating eyes. Why did your fiancé leave you? Emma asked, suddenly breaking the silence. Richard nearly swerved. Emma, Lily scolded. It's all right, Richard said, gathering his thoughts. Elizabeth wanted children. I can't have any. Sometimes people want different things from life. That's sad, Emma declared. You'd be a nice daddy. Her innocent comment struck Richard deeply. Before he could respond, they arrived at their destination, an imposing mansion with sprawling grounds decorated for a lavish wedding. Wow, Emma whispered. as they approached the entrance where guests in designer outfits mingled on a red carpet while photographers captured every arrival. Richard felt a moment of panic. What had he been thinking, bringing two children into this situation? But when he looked down at the girls, he was stunned by their transformation. Lily stood tall, her posture perfect, while Emma smiled sweetly, holding her sister's hand. "Ready?" he asked. Lily nodded. "Remember, we're your nieces visiting from Boston. Our parents are traveling abroad." Richard hadn't suggested this cover story. Lily had crafted it herself. The moment they stepped onto the red carpet, heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Richard guided the girls forward, one hand gently on each of their shoulders. Then he saw her, Elizabeth, speaking with guests near the entrance. She was radiant in her pre-ceremony outfit, her blonde hair styled elegantly. When she spotted Richard, her smile faltered momentarily. Her eyes moved to the girls, confusion evident. Then she excused herself and approached them. "Richard," she said, her voice controlled, "I didn't expect you to come. I wouldn't miss it," he replied smoothly. Elizabeth's gaze lingered on Lily and Emma. "And who are these lovely young ladies?" Before Richard could answer, Lily stepped forward with perfect poise. "I'm Lily, and this is my sister Emma," she said, her voice clear and confident. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Carter. Your venue is absolutely exquisite." Elizabeth blinked, clearly taken aback by Lily's sophisticated response. "Thank you," she managed, her eyes darting questioningly to Richard. Emma tugged at Elizabeth's dress. "Your flowers are pretty. Are those peonies?" "My mommy loved peonies." Elizabeth's expression shifted from confusion to something harder. "How charming," she said, her tone suggesting otherwise. "Richard, I didn't realize you had such young friends. There's a lot you don't know about me now, Elizabeth," Richard replied, feeling an unexpected surge of pride as he stood beside the two girls. The grand ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers and floral arrangements, exuding wealth and elegance from every corner. As Richard guided Lily and Emma through the crowd, murmurs followed them like persistent shadows. "Who are those children? Did Montgomery adopt? I thought he couldn't have children." Richard felt a protective instinct rise as they navigated the sea of curious stares. Emma clutched his hand tightly, while Lily walked beside them with remarkable composure, her eyes observing everything with quiet intensity. "Richard Montgomery," a booming voice called out. Gregory Winters, Elizabeth's uncle, and one of Boston's most influential bankers, approached with a champagne flute in hand. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming, Richard." Richard nodded politely. "Wouldn't miss it." Gregory's gaze shifted to the girls. "And who might these young ladies be?" Before Richard could respond, Lily stepped forward with a graceful smile. "I'm Lily, sir, and this is my sister Emma. It's a pleasure to meet you." Gregory's bushy eyebrows rose at her articulate introduction. "Well, aren't you well spoken?" His eyes narrowed slightly as he studied her face. "You know, you remind me of someone." Lily's smile remained fixed, but Richard noticed her shoulders tense. "I have one of those faces, I suppose," she said. Gregory murmured, unconvinced. "And how do you know, Richard?" "They're my guests," Richard interjected smoothly. "That's all that matters." Emma, who had been quietly observing, suddenly pointed at the string quartet in the corner. "They're playing Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Spring movement, right?" Her small face lit up. "Mommy used to play that on the piano." Gregory's expression shifted from skepticism to surprise. "You know your classical music, young lady." Lily squeezed her sister's hand in warning, but the damage was done. Gregory's interest was piqued. "Montgomery," he said, lowering his voice. "Where did these children really come from?" Richard felt a flash of irritation. "Does it matter? Now, if you'll excuse us." As they moved away, Richard sensed Elizabeth watching from across the room, her eyes following them with growing suspicion. He leaned down to Lily's level. "Is everything okay?" Lily's composed facade briefly slipped. "We shouldn't have come. People are asking too many questions. We'll be fine, Richard assured her, though he was beginning to wonder himself. What exactly were the girls hiding? They found their table elegantly set with name cards and elaborate centerpieces. As they sat down, Elizabeth appeared, accompanied by her soon-to-be husband, William Harrington Tall, conventionally handsome, with the confident air of old money. "Richard," Elizabeth said, her voice artificially warm, "I wanted to properly introduce you to William." The two men exchanged tense handshakes. "And these must be the little girls everyone's talking about," William remarked, his tone condescending as he looked down at Lily and Emma. Emma smiled innocently. "Your wedding is very pretty, but Lily says it's extravagant," Lily supplied, then added with perfect innocence, "almost as if someone needs to prove something." William's smile tightened while Elizabeth's cheeks flushed. "Richard," Elizabeth hissed, dropping all pretense of cordiality, "a word in private." She led him to a quiet alcove away from the guests. "What game are you playing?" she demanded, "showing up with children. Are they even yours?" "Would it matter if they were?" Richard countered. Elizabeth's eyes flashed. "Don't think I don't know what you're doing. Those girls obviously come from money, their manners, their knowledge. They're not some random children." Richard felt a chill. Elizabeth had noticed it too. "I'm watching you, Richard," she warned. "If there's something illegal about your arrangement with those girls, I'll find out." As she stalked away, Richard glanced back at their table. Lily was watching him intently, a knowing look in her eyes that suggested she understood exactly what had just transpired. And suddenly, Richard realized he might have gotten himself into something far more complicated than he'd anticipated. The wedding ceremony proceeded with picture-perfect precision, though Richard barely noticed the vows exchanged. His mind kept drifting to Elizabeth's accusatory words and the mystery surrounding his young companions. During the elaborate dinner that followed, Richard observed as Lily and Emma navigated the formal place settings with practiced ease. Emma knew exactly which fork to use for each course, while Lily engaged in polite conversation with the elderly couple seated across from them. "My granddaughter is about your age," the woman told Lily. "Do you attend Westlake Academy?" "Most of the families here send their children there. We've been homeschooled," Lily replied smoothly. "Our education has been unconventional." The woman nodded approvingly. "Well, your parents have done an excellent job. You're remarkably well-spoken." Emma, who had been quiet, suddenly perked up at the sound of the orchestra beginning a new piece. "Lily, it's Tchaikovsky. Remember when we saw The Nutcracker?" Lily's expression flickered with alarm before she composed herself. "Yes, Emma, that was a long time ago." Richard caught the slip. Another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit, with children who supposedly lived on the streets. As dinner concluded, a distinguished man in his 60s approached their table. His silver hair and tailored suit exuded authority. The room seemed to quieten as he passed. "Judge Harrison," Richard greeted him, standing respectfully. "Montgomery," the judge nodded. "Didn't expect to see you here." Elizabeth's choice was unexpected. His eyes drifted to the girls. "And who might these young ladies be?" Before Richard could answer, the judge's eyes widened slightly as he focused on Lily. "My word," he murmured, "you remind me of Victoria Blackwood. The resemblance is remarkable." Lily paled visibly. Emma looked up at her sister, confusion crossing her small face. "I'm afraid you're mistaken," Lily said, her voice steady despite her obvious discomfort. Judge Harrison studied her face intently. "Perhaps. Though I rarely forget a face, especially one from such a high-profile case." He nodded politely before moving on, leaving an uncomfortable silence in his wake. "Who's Victoria Blackwood?" Richard asked quietly. "Nobody?" Lily replied too quickly. "He's confused." The orchestra began playing a waltz, and guests moved to the dance floor. Richard, sensing Lily needed a distraction, stood and offered his hand. "May I have this dance?" To his surprise, she accepted, following him to the edge of the dance floor. Richard awkwardly placed his hands in the proper position, realizing he hadn't considered that Lily might not know how to waltz. His concern proved unnecessary. Lily followed his lead perfectly, her movements graceful and practiced. "You dance like someone who's had lessons," Richard observed carefully. Lily's eyes met his, calculating. "Maybe I'm just a fast learner. And your sister knows classical music and formal dining etiquette," Richard continued softly. "Lily, you can trust me. Who are you really?" For a moment, vulnerability flashed across her face. Then her walls came back up. "We're nobody, Mr. Montgomery. Just two girls trying to survive." Across the room, Elizabeth watched them dance, her expression darkening. She whispered something to William, who nodded and discreetly left the ballroom, phone in hand. As the music ended, Richard noticed Emma sitting alone at their table, looking unusually subdued. "What's wrong?" he asked, crouching beside her. "I miss home," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Our real home." Before everything got broken, Lily quickly intervened. "Emma, remember what we talked about. Some things we keep private." Richard looked between the sisters, the pieces slowly coming together. These weren't just homeless children. They were running from something or someone, and now he realized, with growing concern, his impulsive decision might have put them all in danger. The evening progressed with dancing and champagne flowing freely. Richard found himself increasingly drawn to the mystery of Lily and Emma, but also genuinely enjoying their company. Emma had brightened up again, her momentary sadness replaced by childlike wonder at the splendor around them. "Mr. Montgomery," Emma said, tugging his sleeve as they stood near the dessert table. "Can we try the chocolate fountain?" Richard smiled. "Of course, and you know you can call me Richard." Emma beamed. "Richard?" She tested the name carefully. "That was my daddy's middle name." This small revelation, the first voluntary piece of information about their past, felt significant. As Richard helped Emma navigate the chocolate fountain, careful not to drip on her dress, he noticed Lily watching them with a complex expression, part weariness, part longing. "She likes you," came a voice beside him. Richard turned to find Elizabeth, her wedding gown shimmering under the ballroom lights. "Emma is a sweet child," Richard replied cautiously. "That's not what I meant." Elizabeth's voice was sharp. "The older one, she looks at you like she's searching for something." Her eyes narrowed. "I've been asking around, Richard. No one knows these girls. They appeared out of nowhere, just like in those tragic news stories about child trafficking." Richard felt a surge of anger. "That's a serious accusation, Elizabeth." "Is it?" She raised an eyebrow. "William has contacts in child services. One call. Is there a problem?" Lily appeared beside them, her young face set in a surprisingly formidable expression. Elizabeth faltered momentarily, clearly not expecting to be confronted by a child. "No problem at all. Just catching up with an old friend." Lily's gaze was unwavering. It didn't look friendly. Elizabeth's smile tightened. "Perceptive little thing, aren't you? Tell me, where exactly are your parents?" Elizabeth challenged. Richard warned. "Our parents are gone," Lily stated flatly. "But that doesn't make us charity cases or victims." Elizabeth leaned down slightly. "You speak like someone much older than you appear. I wonder why that is." Before Lily could respond, the wedding planner approached, requesting Elizabeth's presence for the cake cutting. With one last suspicious glance, she departed. "She's dangerous," Lily said quietly once Elizabeth was out of earshot. Richard nodded. "I'm beginning to see that." He hesitated, then added, "Lily, if you and Emma are in some kind of trouble—" Lily's expression closed off. "We can handle ourselves." "You shouldn't have to," Richard said gently. "You're children." Something flashed in her eyes, pain perhaps, or long-buried grief. "We stopped being children the day our parents died." The raw honesty of her statement stunned Richard into silence. Later, as the reception continued, Richard noticed Emma yawning. Finding a quiet corner with comfortable chairs, he sat with the girls away from the noise. Emma curled up beside him, her small head eventually drooping against his arm as she dozed off. "She trusts you," Lily observed, her voice softer than he'd heard before. "And you?" Richard asked. Lily considered this. "I'm getting there." They sat in companionable silence, watching the celebration from a distance. Richard felt a strange contentment wash over him, one he hadn't experienced in years. "Your ex-fiancée keeps looking over here," Lily noted. "She's jealous." Richard glanced at Elizabeth, who indeed was watching them while pretending to listen to a guest. "Not of me," he said, "of what she thinks we represent." "A family," Lily whispered, almost to herself. The word hung between them, fragile and loaded with meaning. Richard looked down at Emma, sleeping peacefully against him, then at Lily's guarded but softening expression, and felt something shift within his heart. This charade had begun as a way to save face at an uncomfortable event. Now, sitting here with these mysterious girls, Richard realized it had become something else entirely, something real and unexpectedly precious. As the wedding reception reached its peak, Richard noticed William weaving through the crowd toward Elizabeth. They conferred in hushed tones, with William showing her something on his phone. Elizabeth's eyes widened before darting across the room to where Richard sat with the girls. "We should go," Richard said quietly to Lily, a sense of unease growing in his stomach. Lily followed his gaze and nodded gently, waking Emma. "Time to leave." "Monsieur," as they stood to make their exit, Gregory Winters intercepted them, his earlier joviality replaced with a serious expression. "Montgomery, a word," he said, leading Richard slightly away from the girls. "I did some asking around," Gregory lowered his voice. "Those children. There's a situation you might not be aware of." Richard's heartbeat quickened. "What situation?" "The Blackwood case," Gregory said meaningfully. "Surely you remember Charles and Victoria Blackwood, the philanthropists who died in that terrible accident 2 years ago." The name clicked into place. Judge Harrison had mentioned it earlier. Richard vaguely recalled headlines about a wealthy couple killed in a yacht explosion, but hadn't followed the story. "What about them?" Richard asked cautiously. "They had 2 daughters," Gregory continued, eyeing Lily and Emma, who mysteriously disappeared from their grandparents' custody shortly after. There was speculation about foul play, inheritance disputes. Richard felt as though the floor were tilting beneath him. "You think?" "I'm certain," Gregory whispered. "That's Victoria Blackwood's face on that child. Same eyes, same bearing. The Blackwoods were prominent in Boston society. I met them several times." Richard glanced at Lily, who was watching them intently while protectively holding Emma's hand. "Why are you telling me this?" Richard asked. Because Gregory's expression grew grave. "If those are the Blackwood girls, there are people looking for them, powerful people, and Elizabeth's husband to be just made a phone call." Richard thanked Gregory quickly before returning to the girls. "We're leaving now." They moved swiftly toward the exit, but Elizabeth stepped into their path, William at her side. "Leaving so soon?" she asked, her voice saccharine. "The authorities might want to have a word with you first." Lily's grip tightened on Emma's hand. William smirked, cell phone visible in his pocket. "Whatever you think you know, Elizabeth," Richard said evenly, "you're making a mistake." "Am I?" she challenged. "The Blackwood girls have been missing for over a year. Their grandfather has offered a substantial reward for information on their whereabouts." Emma looked up at Lily, confusion and fear in her eyes. "Lily," Richard felt a surge of protectiveness. "We're leaving," he repeated firmly, placing himself between Elizabeth and the girls. "The police are already on their way," William said smugly, "along with a representative from the Blackwood family." Richard made a split-second decision. Bending down to Emma's level, he whispered, "Do you trust me?" She nodded without hesitation. "Then follow me," he said, glancing at Lily, who gave him a barely perceptible nod. Richard led them toward the kitchen instead of the main exit. A server he'd slipped a $100 bill earlier held a service door open. They slipped through, emerging into a back parking area where Richard's car waited, keys already with the valet. As they drove away, Richard checked the rearview mirror. Emma looked frightened, but Lily's expression was one of resigned determination. "Lily," Richard said gently, "I think it's time you told me the whole truth." She stared out the window at the passing streetlights, her young face reflecting years of burden. "We can't go back to your apartment," she said finally. "They'll look there first." "I know," Richard replied. "I have a cabin about 2 hours from here." Lily nodded, then turned to face him fully. "The Blackwoods were our parents," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "And our grandfather is the reason we're running." The following morning brought grey skies and gentle rain to the cabin nestled in the woods outside Seattle. Richard sat at the rustic kitchen table, 2 cups of hot chocolate steaming before him as he waited for the girls to wake. Last night, exhaustion had overcome them all. After arriving at the secluded cabin, Emma had fallen asleep almost immediately in one of the spare bedrooms. Lily, despite her obvious fatigue, had only reluctantly agreed to rest, extracting a promise from Richard that they would talk in the morning. The sound of small footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Emma appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, clutching her worn teddy bear. "Good morning," Richard said gently. "Hot chocolate." Emma nodded and climbed onto the chair. "Is Lily still sleeping?" "I'm here," Lily answered, entering the kitchen with the weariness of someone much older. She looked at the mugs of hot chocolate, then at Richard. "You want to know everything?" "Only what you're comfortable sharing," Richard replied, sliding a mug toward her. Emma looked between them, sensing the tension. "Can I tell him about Mommy and Daddy?" Lily hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Our daddy made buildings," Emma began, warming her hands around the mug. "Tall ones with lots of glass, and Mommy played music and helped people." "Charles and Victoria Blackwood," Richard supplied gently. "Your father was an architect, and your mother was a concert pianist who ran a children's arts foundation." Lily's eyes widened slightly. "You've been researching?" "After we left the wedding," Richard admitted. "I needed to understand." Lily seemed to make a decision. "After our parents died, we went to live with our grandfather, Edmund Blackwood. He seemed kind at first, but then," she glanced at Emma, clearly measuring her words, "he started changing our names, our appearances. He wouldn't let us talk about our parents. He was obsessed with controlling everything. He was mean." Emma interjected. "He took away my teddy and said I was too old for toys. We discovered he was trying to gain control of our trust funds," Lily continued, her voice hardening. "He needed guardianship to access the money our parents left us. One night, I overheard him talking about sending us to separate boarding schools abroad." "So you ran," Richard concluded. Lily nodded. "We've been hiding for almost a year, staying in shelters, sometimes with kind strangers. We were doing okay until a notification sound from Richard's phone interrupted her. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "What is it?" Lily asked immediately, alert. Richard turned the phone to show them. On the screen was a news article with the headline, "Blackwood Heiress Spotted at Harrington Carter Wedding," accompanied by a blurry photo of the girls, Elizabeth. Richard muttered, "She must have tipped off the press." Lily's face paled. "Everyone will be looking for us now." Before Richard could respond, another notification appeared, a text from Marcus. "Turn on the news channel 8 now." Richard quickly found the remote and switched on the cabin's small television. Elizabeth's face filled the screen, standing outside the wedding venue in her wedding dress, wearing an expression of practiced concern. "I was shocked to discover these poor children had been manipulated by my ex-fiancé," she was saying to a reporter. "These vulnerable girls should be with their legal guardian, not used as pawns in some twisted revenge plot." The camera panned to show William beside her, nodding gravely. When I realized who they were, I immediately contacted authorities. The girl's grandfather has been worried sick. The scene changed to show an elderly, distinguished-looking man, Edmund Blackwood, his face a mask of grandfatherly concern. My granddaughters have been through so much trauma after losing their parents. They need professional help, stability. I'm offering a substantial reward for information leading to their safe return. Richard switched off the TV, his jaw tight with anger. They're painting me as a kidnapper. Emma's lower lip trembled. Are they going to take us away? Richard looked at the frightened child, then at Lily, whose eyes held a mix of fear and defiance. In that moment, he made a decision that would change all their lives. No, he said firmly. No one is taking you anywhere you don't want to go. I promise. Lily studied his face, searching for deception. Why would you help us? You barely know us. Richard considered his answer carefully. Because sometimes family isn't about blood. It's about who stands beside you when everyone else has turned away. Rain battered the cabin windows as Richard made quiet phone calls in the corner while the girls huddled on the sofa. Emma had fallen asleep against her sister, exhausted by the morning's revelations. Lily remained vigilant, her eyes never leaving Richard. That was my lawyer, Richard said, finally returning to sit across from them. And a private investigator I trust. They're looking into your grandfather's activities and the legal status of your guardianship. Lily nodded gently, stroking Emma's hair. He'll have the best lawyers. He always gets what he wants. Not this time, Richard replied with quiet determination, but I need to understand everything if I'm going to help you. Lily's eyes grew distant. After our parents died, the first few weeks with grandfather seemed normal as it could be when you're grieving. But then he started changing things. Our schedules became rigid. Our phones were taken away. We couldn't contact our friends. Did he hurt you? Richard asked carefully. Not physically, Lily clarified. But she struggled to find the words. He was erasing who we were, our memories, our parents' legacy. He even fired our nanny, who had been with us since I was born. Why? Richard pressed gently. The money, Lily said simply. Our parents left everything in trusts for Emma and me. Grandfather can't touch it without control of us. Her eyes hardened. One night I heard him on the phone. He was talking about liquidating our father's company once he secured guardianship. Dad spent his life building that company. Emma stirred, blinking sleepily. I'm hungry. Richard smiled, welcoming the interruption. I'll make some sandwiches. In the small kitchen, Richard prepared lunch while processing everything he'd learned. The Blackwood case was more complex than he'd realized. Charles Blackwood's architectural firm had been valued at over $100 million, and Victoria's family fortune added substantially to that. The girls weren't just running from an overbearing grandfather, they were fleeing someone who saw them as access to a fortune. As they ate, Emma seemed to relax, chattering about a squirrel she'd spotted outside the window. Lily remained guarded, but appeared less tense than earlier. We need a plan, Richard said eventually. Elizabeth has made this very public. We can disappear again, Lily suggested. We've done it before. Is that the life you want for Emma? Richard asked gently. Always running, always hiding. Lily's composure finally cracked. What choice do we have? No one believed us before. The court took his side. He's Edmund Blackwood, respected businessman, philanthropist, grieving father who just wants to care for his orphaned granddaughters. Bitterness laced her words. I believe you, Richard said simply. Lily looked up, surprise flickering across her face. And I think I can prove he's after your inheritance, not your welfare, Richard continued. But we need to be smart about this. Going public now would put you at risk. What are you suggesting? Lily asked. We gather evidence, build a case, and when the time is right, we fight back. Legally and publicly, Richard leaned forward. But first, We need to address the kidnapping accusations. His phone rang. Marcus calling. Richard answered, putting it on speaker. You're in trouble, my friend, Marcus said without preamble. Police are at your apartment right now with a search warrant. Elizabeth is playing this perfectly. The concerned ex who discovered missing children. She's painting you as obsessed and vengeful. That's not true, Emma exclaimed indignantly. There was a pause before Marcus responded. Is that one of the girls? Yes, Richard confirmed. Marcus, they ran away from their grandfather for good reason. He's trying to gain control of their inheritance. That changes things, Marcus said thoughtfully. Richard, I have an idea, but it's risky. Elizabeth is holding a press conference tomorrow about the missing Blackwood girls. If you showed up with the girls, absolutely not, Lily interjected. We're not going anywhere near her. Richard considered this. Actually, Lily, that might be exactly what we need to do, not to surrender, but to take control of the narrative. How? Lily asked skeptically. Richard met her gaze, determination in his eyes. By telling your story your way, before anyone can silence you again. Night had fallen over the cabin. Emma slept peacefully in the bedroom, while Richard and Lily sat at the kitchen table surrounded by laptops, legal documents, and hastily scribbled notes. For the past few hours, they had been constructing their counterattack, with Marcus joining them via video call. Elizabeth's press conference is scheduled for noon tomorrow at the Harrington Media Center, Marcus reported, his face serious on the screen. She's framing it as a plea for the safe return of the Blackwood girls. Your grandfather will be there too, Lily. Lily's jaw tightened. Of course he will. The Concerned Grandfather Act is his specialty. My contact at Child Services sent over some interesting information, Richard said, sliding a folder across the table. There were 3 separate reports filed by your former nanny expressing concerns about your grandfather's behavior after your parents died. All 3 were mysteriously dropped. Olivia tried to help us. Lily confirmed quietly. Grandfather made her disappear too. Marcus's eyebrows rose. Disappear? No, Lily clarified quickly. He threatened her family's immigration status. She had to leave the country. Richard made a note. We need to find her. Her testimony would be invaluable. Already on it, Marcus replied. My investigator is tracking her down in Costa Rica. Lily studied the battle plan they developed. You really think this will work? It's risky, Richard admitted. But having you and Emma speak directly to the public changes everything. The narrative stops being about a vengeful ex-fiancé and starts being about 2 children fighting for their rights. What if grandfather tries to take us right there? Lily asked, the worry evident in her young voice despite her attempts to appear strong. That's why we're arranging for Judge Catherine Winters to be present, Richard explained. She's Gregory's sister and has a reputation for being fiercely protective of children's interests. She's agreed to issue an emergency stay on any custody enforcement until a proper hearing can be conducted. Lily looked skeptical. Judges sided with grandfather before. They didn't have all the facts, Richard countered, and they hadn't seen this. He turned his laptop to show her an email from his investigator. Attached were financial documents showing substantial sums being transferred from Edmund Blackwood's accounts to offshore holdings shortly after he gained temporary guardianship. He's already moving money around, Lily whispered, anger flashing in her eyes. Our parents' money, precisely, Richard said. And that's just the beginning. My team found a draft proposal to liquidate Blackwood Architects and sell off its assets to a developer in Dubai. Lily's hands trembled slightly. Dad loved that company. He built it from nothing. Richard reached across the table and gently covered her small hand with his. I know what it's like to have something precious taken away. I won't let that happen to you and Emma. Lily didn't pull away, which Richard took as a significant sign of trust. There's one more thing, Marcus interjected. Elizabeth's press conference is a trap. She's expecting you to either stay hidden, making you look guilty, or show up alone to defend yourself, making you look desperate. She won't expect all three of us, Richard concluded. Exactly. And she certainly won't expect you to have evidence and legal representation ready. Marcus smiled grimly. The element of surprise is crucial. My car will pick you up at 11:00 a.m. Back entrance. No cameras. As the call ended, Richard noticed Lily stifling a yawn. You should get some rest, he said gently. Tomorrow will be a challenging day. Lily hesitated. Richard, yes? Why are you doing all this for us? Really? Her eyes searched his, looking for any sign of deception. Most adults want something in return. Richard considered his answer carefully. When I found out I couldn't have children of my own, I thought that part of my life was over. Then you and Emma came along. He paused, emotion catching in his throat. I'm helping you because it's the right thing to do, but also because you've helped me remember what matters most. Lily studied him for a long moment before nodding slowly. Good night, Richard, she said quietly, and for the first time, the weariness in her eyes was replaced with something that looked remarkably like hope. A light fog hung over Seattle as Richard's car pulled up to the service entrance of the Harrington Media Center. The glass and steel building loomed above them. Its modern architecture created an intimidating presence. Inside, Elizabeth would be preparing to deliver her carefully crafted narrative to the waiting press. Are you both ready? Richard asked, turning to look at Lily and Emma in the back seat. Emma, dressed in a simple but elegant blue dress, clutched her sister's hand. I'm scared, Lily, she whispered. Lily, wearing a conservative green dress that made her look both dignified and unmistakably young, squeezed her sister's hand reassuringly. Remember what we practiced, she said. Just tell the truth. The truth, Emma repeated, nodding solemnly. Richard's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. All set. Judge Winters is in position. Media fully assembled. Blackwood and Elizabeth on stage now. It's time, Richard said, his voice steady despite the tension knotting his stomach. They entered through the service door where Marcus was waiting, dressed impeccably in a dark suit. His eyebrows rose slightly at the sight of the girls, their transformation from the street children he'd heard about to poised young ladies clearly surprising him. The press conference has just started, he informed them, leading the way through the back corridors. Elizabeth is making her opening statement now. Your grandfather looks appropriately concerned for the cameras. Lily's face darkened at the mention of her grandfather. He's always been good at pretending. They reached a side entrance to the main conference room. Through the partially open door, they could see Elizabeth at the podium, her expression a perfect mask of concern as camera flashes illuminated her face. These vulnerable children need to be returned to their loving grandfather, Elizabeth was saying, her voice carrying through the speakers. My ex-fiancé, Richard Montgomery, in what can only be described as a disturbed attempt at revenge, has taken these girls from their rightful guardian. Edmund Blackwood stood nearby, his distinguished features arranged in an expression of grandfatherly worry. I just want my granddaughters back, he added when Elizabeth paused. They've been through so much already, losing their parents. Richard felt Lily tense beside him. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Remember, we control the narrative now. Questions? Elizabeth asked the assembled reporters. A woman in the front row raised her hand. Miss Carter, how did you discover the identity of these children? Before Elizabeth could answer, Richard nodded to Marcus, who opened the door fully. Richard stepped into the conference room, Lily and Emma walking confidently on either side of him. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd as cameras swiveled toward them. Perhaps, Richard said clearly, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent room, you should ask the children themselves. Elizabeth's perfect composure faltered, her mouth opening slightly in shock. Edmund Blackwood's face hardened, his eyes fixing on his granddaughters with an intensity that made Emma shrink closer to Richard. "Richard?" Elizabeth recovered quickly, her voice sweet with false concern. "I'm so glad you've brought the girls safely. Mr. Blackwood has been so worried." "I'm sure he has," Richard replied evenly, "though perhaps not for the reasons he claims." Murmurs spread through the assembled reporters as they sensed the unexpected confrontation developing. "Lily and Emma Blackwood have something they would like to say," Richard continued, guiding the girls toward the front of the room where a second microphone stood. Security personnel moved uncertainly, looking to Edmund Blackwood for direction. He gave a slight nod, clearly calculating that forcibly removing the children would look terrible on camera. Lily stepped to the microphone, her young face remarkably composed despite the flashing cameras. "My name is Lily Blackwood. This is my sister, Emma. We are not missing, and we have not been kidnapped." The room erupted in questions. Lily waited for the noise to subside before continuing. "After our parents died, our grandfather changed. He isolated us, controlled every aspect of our lives, and began dismantling everything our parents built." Her clear voice never wavered. "When we discovered he planned to separate us and sell our father's company, we ran away. We were living on the streets when Mr. Montgomery found us." Emma stepped forward, her small voice surprisingly strong in the microphone. "Grandfather was mean. He took away our pictures of Mommy and Daddy. He said we couldn't talk about them anymore." Elizabeth attempted to retake control. "These children have clearly been coached. They're confused and traumatized." "I'm not confused," Lily interrupted firmly, "and we have evidence." Marcus stepped forward, distributing folders to key reporters in the front row. "These documents show financial transactions made by Edmund Blackwood immediately after gaining temporary guardianship, diverting funds from the Blackwood family trusts to offshore accounts." A tall, dignified woman rose from her seat near the back. Judge Catherine Winters commanded attention without speaking a word. "As a family court judge," she announced, "I find these allegations deeply troubling. I am issuing an immediate stay on all custody arrangements pending a full investigation." Edmund Blackwood's face contorted with rage. "This is preposterous. These are my granddaughters." "Yes, we are," Lily replied, her voice steady as she looked directly at her grandfather. "But we are also our parents' daughters, and we won't let you destroy what they built." The room exploded with questions as reporters rushed forward. Security formed a protective barrier around Richard and the girls. Through the chaos, Richard caught Elizabeth's eye. Her perfect facade had crumbled, replaced by cold fury as she realized her carefully orchestrated plan had backfired spectacularly. As they were escorted to a private room, Emma looked up at Richard, her small face serious. "Did we do good?" Richard knelt down to her level, his heart full of pride and something deeper he wasn't quite ready to name. "You did better than good, Emma. You were both incredibly brave." For the first time since he'd met them, Lily's guard completely dropped. She threw her arms around Richard's neck in a spontaneous hug. "Thank you for believing us," she whispered, her voice finally sounding like that of the child she truly was. Over her shoulder, Richard could see reporters gathered around Judge Winters, who was speaking with firm authority. Edmund Blackwood was being questioned by two seriously-looking men in suits that Richard recognized as investigators from the district attorney's office. The battle wasn't over yet, but the first crucial victory was theirs. The weeks following the press conference passed in a blur of legal meetings, court appearances, and adjustments to a new reality. Richard's penthouse, once a showcase of modern minimalism, had transformed dramatically. Emma's drawings now adorned the refrigerator. Colorful chapter books filled the bookshelves, and a small piano stood in the corner of the living room. Richard sat at his desk, reviewing paperwork, when a tentative knock interrupted his thoughts. Lily stood in the doorway, her expression serious. "The lawyers called," she said. "Judge Winters made her decision." Richard nodded, gesturing for her to enter. "I just got the email." And Lily's voice betrayed her anxiety, despite her attempt to appear composed. "Your grandfather has been permanently removed as a guardian," Richard confirmed gently. "The court has appointed an independent trustee to manage the Blackwood assets until you both come of age." Lily's shoulders sagged with relief. "What about the company? Dad's company?" "Blackwood Architects remains intact," Richard assured her. "In fact, Marcus and I have been speaking with your father's former partners. They want to preserve his legacy and vision." Lily nodded, absorbing this information. Over the past weeks, Richard had noticed her gradually allowing herself to act more like the child she was, though the protective instincts forged during their time on the streets remained. "There's something else we need to discuss," Richard said carefully. "The court needs to assign you a permanent guardian." Lily tensed immediately. "They won't separate us, will they? They promised." "No one is separating you and Emma," Richard interrupted gently. "But decisions need to be made about your future." Before he could continue, Emma burst into the room, her face alight with excitement. "Richard, I finished my piano practice. Want to hear?" Richard smiled. "Of course I do." Emma grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the living room where the small piano waited. Lily followed, her previous anxiety momentarily set aside. Emma positioned herself carefully on the bench, her small fingers poised above the keys with determination. The melody that emerged was simple but played with heartfelt concentration. For Elise, the piece Emma had once mentioned her mother taught her. When she finished, Richard applauded sincerely. "That was beautiful." "Mommy used to play it much better," Emma said, a hint of sadness in her voice. "But she said I was learning fast." "She'd be very proud of you," Richard said softly. Emma beamed at him before skipping off to find her drawing supplies, leaving Richard and Lily alone. "She's happy here," Lily observed quietly. "Are you?" Richard asked, turning to face her. Lily considered the question carefully. "I don't feel afraid anymore." "That's new," Lily said. Richard began choosing his words with care. "I've been thinking a lot about what happens next for all of us." "You want us to stay," she stated simply. "Very much," Richard admitted. "These past weeks, having you both here, it's changed everything for me." Lily studied his face with the perceptiveness that had impressed him from their first meeting. "You never thought you'd have a family?" "No," he agreed. "When I found out I couldn't have children, I thought that door was closed forever. And now I realize that family isn't always what you expect it to be." Richard's voice grew soft. "Sometimes it finds you when you least expect it." A small, genuine smile, still rare but becoming more frequent, spread across Lily's face. "Emma would like that. She already thinks of this as home." "And you?" Richard asked gently. Lily looked around the apartment, taking in the subtle changes that marked their presence. "I think," she began thoughtfully, "I think our parents would want us to be somewhere safe, with someone who cares about us, not just our inheritance." Richard felt his heart expand with a warmth he'd never experienced before. "I've filed preliminary paperwork for adoption," he said cautiously. "But only if that's what you both want." For a long moment, Lily was silent. Then, with the seriousness of someone making a monumental decision, she nodded. "I think we'd like that very much." From the hallway came Emma's voice, bright with excitement. "Can I call you Dad then?" Just as life settled into a comfortable rhythm, an unexpected letter arrived that threatened to disrupt everything. Richard stared at the official-looking envelope, a familiar dread pooling in his stomach. "What is it?" Marcus asked, noticing Richard's expression during their lunch meeting. "Catherine Newman is seeking custody of the girls," Richard replied, his voice tight. "She claims to be their mother's second cousin." Marcus frowned. "After 3 months? Convenient timing." now that the publicity has died down and their financial future is secure. Exactly, Richard agreed grimly. The hearing is scheduled for next week. That evening, Richard struggled with how to tell the girls. He found them in the living room, Lily helping Emma with her math homework. Their easy companionship, the way they'd transformed his sterile penthouse into a warm home, made the threat of losing them unbearable. "We need to talk," he said gently, sitting across from them. Lily immediately sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" Richard explained the situation as carefully as possible, watching their faces for reactions. Emma's eyes filled with tears while Lily's expression hardened into the protective mask he hadn't seen in weeks. "She doesn't even know us," Emma whispered. "Why would she want us?" "Money," Lily answered bluntly. "Now that grandfather can't control the trusts, she wants to try." Richard nodded. "That's what my lawyer suspects too." Emma clutched her teddy bear tightly. "I don't want to go with her. I want to stay with you. We should run," Lily suggested suddenly, her voice taking on an urgent quality that alarmed Richard. "We did it before." "No," Richard interrupted firmly. "Running isn't the answer. We'll face this together, legally." "But what if we lose?" Lily challenged, fear breaking through her composed facade. Richard knelt before her, gently taking her hands. "Lily, I promise you this. I will never stop fighting for you both. But I need you to trust me. Running now would only hurt our case." Lily studied his face intently, searching for any sign of deception. "You really believe we can win?" "I do," Richard affirmed. "Judge Winters knows your story. The evidence against your grandfather applies to anyone seeking control of your inheritance." "What if?" Emma began hesitantly. "What if we tell them we choose you?" Richard smiled softly. "That matters a great deal, Emma. The court considers children's preferences, especially articulate, intelligent children like you two." That night, after the girls went to bed, Richard stood in the doorway of their room, watching them sleep. Emma clutched her teddy bear, while Lily's hand stretched protectively toward her sister, even in slumber. In that moment, Richard knew with absolute certainty that he would do whatever it took to keep his newfound family together. These girls had healed something in him he hadn't even realized was broken. He wouldn't let anyone take them away. The family court was hushed as Judge Winters reviewed the final documents before her. Richard sat with Lily and Emma on one side of the room, Catherine Newman and her attorney on the other. The woman's designer clothes and perfect manicure couldn't hide the calculating look in her eyes as she glanced at the girls. "Before I announce my decision," Judge Winters said, "I'd like to hear from Lily and Emma Blackwood." Lily stood first, her posture straight despite her nervousness. "Your Honor, when our parents died, we lost everything. Not just them, but our sense of safety, our home, our identities." Her young voice carried clearly through the courtroom. "Until we met Richard, we were just running and surviving." Emma joined her sister, small hand clutched in Lily's. "Richard doesn't treat us like we're just money. He helps me with piano and listens when I talk about my mommy and daddy. He keeps their picture by my bed so I can say goodnight to them." Judge Winters nodded thoughtfully. "And what about Miss Newman?" "She is your blood relative. We've never met her before the hearing last week," Lily answered honestly. "She never came to our parents' funeral. She never looked for us when we were living on the streets." Richard felt a surge of pride at their composure and clarity. Judge Winters turned to Catherine Newman. "Miss Newman, you've claimed a deep concern for your cousin's children, yet there's no evidence you attempted to contact them before their substantial inheritance was secured by the court." Newman shifted uncomfortably. "I only recently learned of their situation, despite the extensive national news coverage." Judge Winters raised an eyebrow. Richard held his breath as Judge Winters reviewed her notes one final time. "It is the finding of this court that the best interests of Lily and Emma Blackwood will be served by granting full legal guardianship to Richard Montgomery, with adoption proceedings to follow. She looked directly at the girls. Your parents would be proud of your courage. Outside the courthouse, under a rare streak of Seattle sunshine, Emma launched herself into Richard's arms. We won. We get to stay together. Richard hugged her tightly, then extended an arm to include Lily, who joined the embrace without hesitation. Now we're really a family, Emma declared. We've been a family for a while now, Richard corrected gently. Today just makes it official. Later that afternoon, in the garden of what was now truly their home, Richard and the girls planted a young cherry tree. In memory of Charles and Victoria Blackwood, Richard said, as Emma carefully patted soil around the sapling's base. So they'll always be part of our new beginning. Lily, who had maintained her composure throughout the emotional day, finally allowed tears to fall. Thank you for not giving up on us, she whispered. Richard knelt beside her. Thank you for showing me what family really means. As the three of them stood together in the golden afternoon light, Richard reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as a misguided attempt to save face at an ex's wedding had become the most meaningful chapter of his life. Family wasn't about blood or biology. It wasn't about what you couldn't have or what you'd lost. Family was about choosing each other every day, through difficulties and joy alike. It was about building something new from the broken pieces of the past. It was, quite simply, about love. Richard thought he couldn't have a family. But two brave little girls taught him that family isn't just about blood, it's about love, protection, and choosing each other through it all. If this story moved you, brought a tear to your eye, or reminded you that the most unexpected bonds are often the strongest, like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. We share emotional, powerful stories that stay with you long after they end. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story that could touch your heart.